Hi, everyone, and welcome to the March Customer Success webinar. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to enter the webinar, and then we'll go ahead and get started. So first of all, I want to thank you all very much for taking the time to be with us today. We're excited to go through the webinar with all of you. But before we get started, just want to give a quick note here. So everybody will be muted for the duration of the webinar, which means that hopefully everyone is able to hear me, but I won't be able to hear you. However, we want to keep this as interactive as possible. So even though you guys are muted, if you have any questions or have any comments you'd like to add to the conversation, please feel free to use the chat box for that, and we'll cover your questions at the end of our webinar as well. And for today's webinar, I'm Ana Cristina. I'm joined by Marcus Andren, who will be helping with those questions that we get throughout the webinar and at the end. We're both on the customer success team here at Zenput. And that being said, for today's webinar, we'll be talking about improving food safety execution at your stores as part of our brand new webinar series on pillars of operations execution. So here is a quick look at our agenda. We'll actually start off by introducing the food safety pillar. From there, we'll talk a little bit about food safety best-in-class use cases. We'll also go through some best practices and cool things people use. We're also going to share a few very exciting Zenput announcements. And then, as always, we'll circle back at the very end with a quick Q&A to answer any questions that are relevant to the group. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to drop those in, and Marcus might answer you through the chat, or I will answer those live at the very end in the Q&A session. So that being said, let's just go ahead and jump right into it. So just to give a brief introduction to our brand new webinar series on the pillars of operations execution. Over the past few months, we've been taking a look through our entire customer base, looking through to see what types of things you're using Zenput for. And from our standpoint, Zenput really can be the central hub for all activity that happens inside of your stores. These pillars of operations execution are those areas of operations that we know and that we see our customers really thriving with Zenput in. And there are 6 pillars. So food safety is the first one that we'll be covering today. We also have operations, safety, marketing, human resources, and loss prevention. And within that, we'll weave in new product updates, best practices, some other ideas into this, because through our lens of what are those ways that you can expand your usage of Zenput, this gives you a way to look at that and find out more about it, as well as receive important product updates. And when we think about food safety in Zenput, It is really about digitizing and automating food safety and sanitation as much as you can. So you really want to make sure that you protect your customers and your brand. You want to make sure that you're keeping people safe, nobody's getting sick, and also want to avoid any kind of costly mistakes, which mean potentially getting a bot at it. And Zenput enables operators to communicate food safety procedures to the stores, equip store teams to execute them correctly and on time, and most importantly, gain insights into stores to improve food safety. And we broke down our food safety pillar into 4 different buckets, which are the areas that you should be putting your attention to. So the first bucket that we have is clean environments, as maintaining cleanliness in your stores is critical to preventing foodborne illness. We want our stores to not only look visibly clean, but also sanitize clean. Even when surfaces and equipment look clean, potentially harmful bacteria may still be present. Therefore, all food contact surfaces must also be sanitized and, of course, done so frequently throughout the day at regularly scheduled intervals. Then our second bucket here is safe temperatures, which is another critical component of food safety, because ensuring that food is always held at the right temperature can prevent the risk of bacteria growing and multiplying. Then we have our third bucket, which is proper food preparation, as handling food safely during preparation is another critical component to preventing foodborne illness. And your staff is responsible for ensuring that the meals that your establishment serves are safe to eat. And our last bucket here is healthy employees. Obviously, we want to make sure that our staff members come to work healthy and follow the proper safety protocols, as this is also key to prevent the spreading of foodborne illness. So now let's review some examples of best-in-class use cases. These are forms used to ensure the quality and consistency of food preparation, standardized annotation processes, really any of those operating procedures to help deliver that positive experience and protect the health and safety of both your employees and your customers. So your temperature logs, HACCP logs, we want to make sure that the temperature checks are being performed consistently at regular intervals. Cooling and heating equipment is in good condition and functioning properly, and that monitoring devices are registering temperatures accurately. Also, food prep checklists, as mentioned earlier, handling food safely during preparation is critical to preventing foodborne illness, from cooking and serving complex recipes in-house to simply heating and packaging prepared items to go. We also have product recalls. Many folks have product recalling procedures where they usually do a form where somebody has to say, yes, I made sure to throw this away. It is no longer available. They may take a picture and sign it to ensure that product is actually no longer available. And food quality concerns is also another use case to document any food quality incident that may have occurred at the store and easily notify the right people about this. And for those of you who at this point may be thinking, I really like to have any of these forms added to my account, how can I actually do it? Well, it is very easy. If you are already performing this outside of Zenput, perhaps it is still being done on pen and paper. You always have the option of going to the form section in the Zenput web app, go to new form, click on upload form, and our support team will be happy to help with that. They can help you build the form in your account. And our second option here, some of these forms are already in the Brand Hub, so you can always copy them over to your account from there as well. And a couple of other use cases are remote equipment sensors, or Zenput sensors automate temperature monitoring and instantly send notifications if food or equipment temperatures go out of range. With those, we enable to communicate safe holding temperatures to your teams, save employees valuable time, and track trends to make sure that adjustments and reduce food waste as well. And another use case would be food label printers. They simplify critical steps of the food labeling process while saving employees time and improve food safety compliance. And it ensures that labels have accurate expiration dates and details, and also allow labeling tracking to ensure that the labels are correct, as I mentioned. And we can also get insights into food preparations. So in the next couple of slides, I'll be sharing best practices and cool things people use. But just before we review them, I just want to mention that as an additional resource for this webinar, our Operator's Guide to Food Safety Execution ebook is available for all of you to download right now. If you want to have more insights on how Zenput can help leverage food safety execution, you can click on the handout section and you'll be able to download our ebook from there. So that being said, we wanted to share a couple of pro tips to avoid food safety common violations. And just taking a step back here, referencing to the 4 different buckets that we went through during the food safety pillar introduction at the beginning of the webinar. To have a clean environment, we want to avoid hand contamination of ready-to-eat foods. Adding proper hygiene handling procedures to your food safety checklist will ensure that compliance. Also, as part of keeping safe temperatures, we want to avoid improper cooling of cooked, potentially hazardous foods by using timers or cool down software tools paired with temperature sensors to track that foods have been cooled in the safe way. And we also recommend automating parts of your food labeling process to make sure that prepared food will always be labeled correctly, and of course, prevent the improper labeling of ready-to-eat food made on site. And we also want to avoid improper hand washing facilities. So we also highly recommend assigning stores a weekly task or a reminder for cleaning and restocking the hand washing areas. So now let's review a couple of examples or cool things people are using on how to make your form really efficient. So adding the proper types of questions to forms can really make the difference. For instance, if there's any critical question that was responded no, we suggest adding a picture requirement. Therefore, we can actually look at what happened at the store and we can also have it documented. And also making all questions required is very important, as it can prevent forms from being submitted with important questions unanswered. We also recommend automating follow-up actions through triggers. For instance, for a product recall, we want to make sure that the right people are notified. In this example, we're setting up a trigger alert, which means that whenever the store submits a product recall, the district manager will immediately receive an alert that will look like the image on the right side of the slide, where they'll get the alert as well as the details of the submission. And as an additional example here, that would be setting up pencil whip and triggers. And to give some context, in Zenput, we have the ability to notify the right people whenever somebody submits a form in less than the typical time that they would take to complete the form. So adding a pencil whip and trigger could really help us know if work isn't being completed as it should. We also want to make sure that forms that should be available at all times, such as food quality concern forms, are distributed to our team. And in order to do that, we would have to go to the Distribute tab on the form editor and manage the access to share the form with our folks. And on the right side of the slide, we can see an example of how the distributed form would look from the mobile app in the My Forms section. Another best practice to leverage temperature control is setting up the sensor's health report. You can take 1 minute to set this up by logging into Zenput, go to Reports, select Create New Report, go to Sensors and select Sensors Health and click on Create Report. And from there, you have the option of exporting that report, which will email you the report in Excel, or you also have the option of saving it as an automated report, where you'll be able to pick how often you want to receive it, whether you want to receive the report on a daily basis, weekly basis, or monthly basis. And the sensor health report will give you a quick status overview of all temperature sensors across your operation. So how many sensors or gateways are offline, sensor battery levels, and a detailed view showing specific sensor health at every location. So this will give you a single view of stores that you may need to follow up with about equipment issues. Also, you can improve your communication with your stores by using the comment section. In this example, we're looking at a temperature log submission, and we noticed that the temperature of beef was out of range. So we can easily add a comment by clicking on the submission, hovering over to the right side of the screen, click on comments, and add a comment to follow up with the store. And another best practice is reviewing your dashboard to identify risk at a glance. We can easily identify triggers that get activated the most by looking at the top triggers card in our dashboard. At the bottom of the first image, we can see that our pencil whipping trigger went out for one of my stores on the week of February 21st. And the cool thing about this is that our cards in the dashboard are interactive, so that means that they're clickable. So I can actually click on the pencil whipped form trigger to see the details, such as what was the location that activated the trigger, how long they took to complete the form, as well as the responses for that submission. And we also have the frequently answered no card. I can search for any particular form, such as a temperature log, and it will allow me to see those areas of opportunity for my stores. We're going to see which questions were most frequently answered no. So this tells you where you need to focus your coaching and where you need to focus your attention so you can quickly see what's going well and what's not. And we do have a couple of updates. We're very, very excited to share that. Very soon, you'll be able to print labels on a single printer from more than one device. Just connect multiple tablets or smartphones to the same printer and print like you normally would. Also, the Zenput Labels app has been redesigned to make it more intuitive and easy to use. Important information like bulk or single print, printer connection, user, and location information will be always available at the top of the screen. So this makes it easier to quickly access the settings and information that you need. And very soon, you'll be able to use the Zenput Labels app on smartphones in addition to tablets. So this allows you to print labels regardless of the types of devices that you have at your stores currently. And you'll just need to update the Labels app in the app stores and you'll be ready to go. So that wraps up the content for today's webinar. We'll take a second here to see if there's any questions. I'll be bringing Marcus back in. Marcus, do we have any questions from our attendees?
Yep. Hey, Anna, and hey, everyone. Thanks again for taking the time. Just a couple of quick questions as you were going through here. The first one, going back to that pencil whipping trigger, how can I actually set up a pencil whip alert?
Good question. So if you want to add a pencil whipping trigger, you would go to the form section in the Zenput web app, go to edit the form which you want to add the pencil whipping trigger to, click on the triggers tab and create trigger. And from there, on the left side of the screen at the top, you'll be able to see the metadata section. You would select time to complete and set up the criteria. So if you want to add a trigger to go out if the time to complete was, for instance, less than 2 minutes, you would add 2 minutes. And then at the bottom, you'll be able to see an alert card where you can select role, user, or email, and that role, user, or email will receive the alert.
Perfect, thank you. Another one here on triggers. How many triggers can I add in a form?
Great question. So there isn't a specific limit for adding triggers. However, we do try to recommend that you always be very strategic about the type of triggers that you're adding and also the amount. You always want to make sure that you're looking at those critical items for your organization and addressing those. So you can add as many triggers as you need, but as a best practice, we recommend being very, very strategic about it.
Okay, perfect. And then one last question that we'll answer in front of the group. And then if any of you ask questions that we're not answering today, we'll all follow up just individually and get those questions answered for you if they're a little bit more specific to your organization here. But last question, what happens if a required question is not answered?
Yeah, so if the question was set up to be required, and it has the red asterisk right next to the question, Zampud will not allow the user to click submit. So if there are any required questions unanswered, they'll not be able to complete their task or submit the form. So if you see the red asterisk right next to the question, just make sure to respond to that question as well so that you can actually submit the form.
Perfect. Thank you, Anna. That's all from me.
All right. Thank you very much, Marcus, for helping out with the questions. And thank you all for your questions. We truly appreciate your participation. And the last thing I will say is please reach out to your customer success manager or the support team. If you have any questions, you can definitely reach out to us and we'll be happy to help. Also, stay tuned for the next webinar. We do this every month, so definitely keep an eye out for our next one. But again, thank you all very much for joining today and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you all. Have a good one.